Monsta Creepypasta.
This is 3 Creepypasta horror stories told in second-person perspective. If you like my content, then feel free to give my video a thumbs up and possibly subscribe to my channel for future videos like this one. Now, my friends, let's make you a part of a scary story. And if you can make it to the end of the video, I'll show you a picture of the ground. He Laughs was once a man named Gregory Thorne, a traveling entertainer in the late 1800s who earned his living by making people laugh. But Gregory's humor masked a darker side, a profound emptiness and obsession with the sound of laughter. When his audiences stopped coming, he turned to desperate measures, trapping people in his home and forcing them to laugh at his jokes. One stormy night, a traveling salesman knocked on his door. The man seemed intrigued by Gregory's obsession and offered him a chance to make the world laugh forever. Desperate, Gregory agreed, unaware that the salesman was no ordinary man, but a harbinger of dark, otherworldly forces. Gregory awoke the next morning transformed, his eyes stretched unnaturally wide, his teeth razor sharp, and his laugh no longer human. Now, cursed to internally hunt those who hear his unsettling laughter, he is now forced to feed on their fear, marking his victims to ensure they can never truly escape his hunger. His existence is a twisted parody of the joy he once sought to spread, leaving terror and blood in his wake. And you have experienced him firsthand. You first saw him across the street, a man seemingly ordinary at first glance, standing motionless under a flickering street lamp, his wide, unblinking eyes locked onto yours, and his grin stretched unnaturally, revealing rows of jagged, glinting fangs. He laughed, a high-pitched, breathy sound, like a cross between a hyena and a malfunctioning machine. The laughter echoed through the empty streets, sending chills down your spine. Your instincts screamed to run, but your legs felt stuck. He began to walk towards you, his movements precise, almost too perfect, as though he was mimicking what a human should look like. His plain white shirt and black slacks were spotless, but they hung on him as if his frame beneath wasn't quite right. The moment you saw him break into a sprint broke the paralysis. You turned and ran, your heart hammering in your chest. His laughter followed, growing louder and more sinister as his dress shoes clacked unnervingly fast against the pavement. "Just a bite," he called, his voice cheerful and mocking. "Just a taste," he continued. You didn't look back. You remained running as fast as you could. You darted into an alley, your breath coming in gasps, hoping the shadows would conceal you. But his laughter never faded. It grew louder, as if he was everywhere at once. Suddenly, he appeared at the alley's mouth, illuminated by a dim, buzzing neon light. His wide eyes almost glowed in the darkness, and his grin stretched even further, splitting his face like a wound. "You're mine now," he said, his voice dripping with glee. "A little mark, and I'll always find you." You bolted through the other end of the alley, bursting out onto another street, but no matter where you went, he followed. His pace never slowed, his laughter never ceased. Even when you thought you had lost him, the sound of his dress shoes would click softly behind you, followed by that hideous, gurgling giggle. And then, he bit you. It was fast. He was on you in a flash, the cold sharpness of his fangs piercing your shoulder, and the searing pain that radiated through your body like fire. You screamed while stumbling, but when you turned to fight back, he was gone. The wound throbbed, black and tar-like stuff spreading through your veins, causing pain beneath your skin. The next days were worse. The bite never healed. You could feel him, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. At night, his laughter echoed in your ears, growing louder the longer you ignored it. You'd see his reflection in windows, standing right behind you, even though no one was there. When you ran, he followed, always staying just far enough to torment you, and when you stopped, his laugh would hum in your ear. The mark he left on you pulsed, with each passing day, a beacon calling him closer, and when the hunger finally came for him again, there would be no running, and you will be food. The fear carver was once a man named Silas Grieve, a butcher in a small, isolated town during the 1970s. Silas lived a life consumed by jealousy and bitterness, tormented by the respect and affection others received, while he was met with fear and revulsion due to his imposing size and cold demeanor. His resentment grew into an obsession with control, and he began carving symbols of his rage into the walls of his shop and the animals he slaughtered. One fateful night, Silas captured a wandering beggar who came seeking shelter. Unbeknownst to him, the beggar was a cursed being, a vessel of fear itself. When Silas killed the man, the curse latched onto him, feeding on his darkest desires. Silas's body warped into a monstrous reflection of his inner torment. His arms became jagged blades, his eyes grew into a single glaring orb, and his hunger for control transformed into a thirst of fear. Now known as the Fear Carver, he prowls the edges of human consciousness, drawn to those who are alone and terrified, carving their fear into the fabric of existence as his internal masterpiece. And you have encountered him. You sit alone in the dim light of your living room, the clock on the wall ticking louder than usual. You felt it all day, that creeping unease crawling up your spine, the sensation of being watched, even though no one else is home. The quiet is suffocating, and every creak of the house makes your pulse quicken. That's when you hear something. The unforgettable sound of a thud, as if something heavy had slammed onto the floor, and it was so impactful, it vibrated your entire house. You freeze, your breath catching in your throat. Then another thud, one closer this time. Your fear spikes, and you sit there preparing for anything. And that's when he appears. The room grows colder, the air thicker, and the shadows stretch unnaturally. Emerging from the darkness, he steps forward. The Fear Carver. He's massive, at least 7 feet tall, with a bulky, monstrous frame. His pale shape glistens as though damp, the light catching the grotesque shine. A few tufts of thin blonde hair cling stubbornly to his otherwise bald head. But it's his face that makes your stomach churn. One enormous, bloodshot eye glares at you from the center of his face, its gaze piercing and all-consuming. Below it, his mouth spreads into an inhuman one, jagged and wide, filled with crooked yellow teeth. His breath rasps audibly, smelling of rust and decay. He's shirtless, his disgusting torso riddled with scars, yet he wears a butcher's apron tied around his waist, smeared with stains you don't want to identify. But it's his arms that make you shudder, long and muscular, ending not in hands, but in gleaming, serrated blades that glint ominously in the dim light. You want to scream, but no sounds come out, because you're too afraid. He tilts his head, as though savoring the terror radiating off of you. The single eye narrows, locking onto yours as he drags one blade across the floor, the screeching sound setting your teeth on edge. You scramble backward, your mind racing. What does he want? How did he get here? Why you? He moves with a predatory grace, far too fast for his size. His blades scrape across walls, floors, furniture, anything in his path, leaving deep gouges as though marking his territory.
Fear calls me,
he says, his voice loud and terrifying. Your mind flashes back to earlier. The late-night news report about a missing person, the strange noises outside your window, the creeping dread that's been gnawing at you all day. Was it your fear that summoned him? He lunges, and you barely roll out of the way in time. The couch where you sat is sliced cleanly in two, stuffing spilling out like entrails. You stumble to your feet, heart pounding, and sprint for the door. Behind you, his footsteps pound the floor. You remember the thuds from earlier. You burst out into the night, hoping the open air will save you. But the scraping sound follows. You glance back and see him, impossibly fast, his hulking figure close in the distance, effortlessly. He doesn't really need to chase you. He knows you'll tire. He knows your fear will only grow. As you run, you piece together the awful truth. He appears whenever someone is alone and afraid. It doesn't matter where they are. A locked room, an empty street, even a crowded place if the fear isolates them. He's always around, always waiting for the moment when terror takes over. And he doesn't stop, not until he catches you and drags you into the shadows. But as you remained running, you trip, falling hard onto the ground. His shadow looms over you, blocking out the moonlight. You try to crawl away, but he places one bladed arm on the ground beside you, the other poised above. His grotesque mouth splits open, revealing rows of teeth that seem to go on forever. The last thing you see is his single, unblinking eye staring into your soul as the world fades to black. You're driving down a desolated backcountry road, the moon your only companion in the inky blackness. The headlights of your car illuminate the dirt road ahead, framed by the overgrown trees that arch together like hands reaching out. It's late, far too late, and the quiet weighs heavily on you. That's when you see her. A small figure, barely illuminated by your high beams, standing in the middle of the road. A girl, no older than 12. Her long brown hair matted and clinging to her pale skin. She's wearing a white dress, the fabric glowing faintly under the light. A ribbon wrapped tightly around her waist, the color stark against her ghostly appearance. Her shoulders shake with the unmistakable rhythm of sobbing, and she clutches a teddy bear to her chest. You slam on the brakes, your tires skidding against the dirt. The car lurches to a halt, and your heart pounds in your chest. What is a child doing out in the middle of nowhere? You roll down the window, hesitant. "Hey, are you okay?" She doesn't respond. Her back remains to you, the shaking of her body growing more pronounced. The sound of faint, muffled sobbing drifts towards you, and it's heartbreaking. Against your better judgment, you put the car in park and step out. "Do you need help?" you call, your voice trembling slightly. She still doesn't turn. She just stands there, trembling and crying softly. The sound is wrong, though. It doesn't echo like it should, and it seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. You hesitate. Something about this feels off. But what kind of person leaves a little girl stranded? You take a cautious step forward, then another. Your instincts scream at you to stop, but the sight of her small, fragile frame keeps you moving. "Hey," you say again, softer this time. "It's going to be okay. I'll help you. What's your name?" This time, she stops crying. The silence is deafening, pressing down on you like a weight. Then, slowly, she begins to turn. Your stomach twists as she pivots on her heels, her head lowering slightly. When her face comes into view, you stumble backward, bile rising in your throat. Her face is wrong, horribly, impossibly wrong. There are no eyes, no nose, just smooth, pale skin where those features should be. But the absence of those isn't the worst part. It's her mouth. Her face is dominated by an enormous, gaping maw, jagged teeth glinting in the moonlight. The mouth stretches unnaturally wide, the edges curling into something resembling a grin. The teddy bear drops to the ground, forgotten. "Hello," she says, her voice sweet and sing-song, but impossibly layered as though multiple voices are speaking at once. Her monstrous mouth doesn't move when she speaks. You freeze, your body locked in place as terror overtakes you. "I'm Kelly," she says, taking a step closer. Her bare feet make no sound against the dirt, but each step she takes feels like a thunderclap in your chest. You back away, stumbling over your feet, your mind racing with questions. How is she here? Why is she like this? "Don't you want to help me?" she asks, tilting her head. "Don't you want to play with me?" You turn and run. You don't think. You don't look back at all. Her laughter follows you, high-pitched and childlike, but layered with something ancient, something evil. The car is your only hope. You fling open the door, diving inside and slamming it shut. Your shaking hands fumble with the keys, but before you can start the engine, a sharp thud makes you look up. She's standing on the hood, her head tilted, her empty face pressed against the windshield. "Why are you leaving?" she whispers. "Don't you want to play?" Her grin stretches wider, impossibly wide, splitting her face nearly in two. The last thing you see before the glass shatters is the gaping void of her mouth descending on you as she bites off your head. This is the origins of Hello Kelly. The rumor started decades ago, whispered among locals who lived near these lonely roads. They say Kelly was a real girl, a sweet child who loved her teddy bear and wore a white dress with a red ribbon. But one fateful night, she wandered too far from home. No one knows exactly what happened to her, only that she was found days later, headless, her body clutching the same teddy bear. After her death, people began seeing her figure on the roads, always crying, always luring. Some believe she's a manifestation of the rage and despair she felt in her final moments. Others think she's something older, wearing Kelly's form to bait the living. But everyone agrees on one thing. If you see her, don't stop. She feeds on fear, on kindness, on the human need to help. And once you get close, she'll make sure you'll never leave with your head